building again. And essentially the methodology of a housing surge is to do all of that very quickly and to basically get all of our providers on the same page about what those evidence-based practices are, what we're doing in order to move people into housing from an unsheltered location or from anywhere. A housing surge was originally an idea that came out of natural disasters, like hurricanes, or other situations where there's a lot of people who are displaced at a given time, where we collaborate as providers, as the people who are getting paid to do this work, to make the process of entering housing as streamlined as possible and get people into that housing as quickly as possible. So basically, you can break that down into a few steps. There was a little one-pager that was put out about planning a housing surge. And it's been done in a couple of places across the country, but otherwise there hasn't really been a big movement to apply that model of moving a bunch of people who are displaced by an emergency into housing for the homeless population. So we're trying it out, and it works. This is a spoiler alert. But these are all the different steps, and we're gonna walk through all of those in a moment. So for this surge, oh yeah, and I also wanted to show you a little bit of a housing surge that was done in Texas. And so this is kind of a bleak vision of a bunch of tents and then not a bunch of tents. All of those folks moved into housing. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that this visibility, increased visibility of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness is like a resolvable issue if you pair housing resources, like permanent housing that people can move into, with that kind of assistance with relocating into a place that people actually want to go to. That's the key. It's still a person-centered process. This does not work unless you are engaging with each of those folks and making sure that they are interested in the resource that comes on the other side of it. Great. So step one, to convene the key partners. So these are kind of the roles. The search coordinator, that was me, because we kind of came up with this idea and I was like, I guess I'm gonna do it. We had our search points of contact, so basically we don't have any centralized outreach teams, so we gathered all the outreach workers across the community and said, you want to get your folks some housing? Come join us for a weekly meeting. So we had about, I would say about 10, 12 outreach workers across the community working with us, support services and case management, so that warm handoff to the support services associated with the units, landlords, subsidy program administrators, and people with lived experience of homelessness to let us know how we were doing and what their feedback was for the process. In terms of identifying the resources, we had a housing opportunity that was coming online through the Empire State Supported Housing Initiative, or ESHI, for 40 permanent supported housing units within a larger apartment complex for people exiting an experience of chronic homelessness. So we were like, well, we'll take those 40 units and we're gonna try this thing, because at least we don't have to figure out the location and the subsidies. We can just try the method of really bringing the whole community together around this one effort. So this is a steering. It has a conference center in the bottom of it. And then all of the units above, there's 181 units of affordable housing. 40 of those are set aside for people exiting an experience of chronic homelessness into supported units in the building. This is another picture of it. So it is very integrated, we'll get into this later, very integrated into our downtown space. There's like a movie theater right here. There's kind of an alleyway in the middle. And there's a parking garage and some other areas, but it is right on our central commons, if you've ever been to commons. This is a tour, sorry it's a little blurry, of one of the studio units there. So they were brand new. And we had our, the landlord that was involved prioritize lease-ups for these units before anyone else. So these folks were the first folks to move in, they were the first folks to lease up as well. And that was a studio unit, so they did have some one-bedroom units for our households of 2, and some folks who had pets, which was fun. But, yeah, so really pretty. They're like home-like, not institution-like, which is pretty nice. And our support service staff also brought in things like pots and pans, toothbrushes, shampoos and stuff, sheets. So although you don't see those in the tour, they were there. Yeah.
Who gave you a direction?
The ESHI, the landlord. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So the search parameters, once we identified that resource, were that the person had to be chronically homeless. There couldn't be more than 2 individuals' human heartbeats, not necessarily pet heartbeats, so per household. They had to be in good standing with the property management and the supportive housing provider, and they could not be on the lifetime sex offender registry or have a previous charge for producing methamphetamine in housing. So knowing all these things, we had to figure out how are we gonna actually screen people for these things. Yeah?
Who's managing like the 40 apartments? Like who is like the supportive housing?
Sure, it's an organization called Tompkins Community Action. So they have 4 total housing coordinators on site. One of them is more in like a supervisory role, and they have offices that are actually integrated into the site.
Into the building?
Yeah.
And
And they're
so
scattered
next to
throughout.
housing, we have a supportive housing house in front of us. We have 6 tenants, 6
Yeah.
different apartments. And we're the ones that manage that. So I was wondering
Mhm.
if with 40, that's quite an undertaking.
Yeah.
I know what 6 can look like.
Right.
I was just curious. And they supply all the furniture as well?
Yes.
Because we have word and shy as well.
Yeah. It's,
The developer, the owner can, but ESHI, unless you have a home age contract, they don't pay for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do for us.
Yeah, but it's not like that, and it's
Yeah.
rare, it's great that the developer,
Yes.
property management pays for it.
yes, there was a negotiation around that. There was a lot of like, this is what we need. Yeah, because they've done this, the TC Action's done this before with some youth set aside units for ESHI, and so they were like, this time, we need all of these things. Yeah. Alright, so is anyone familiar with this flow chart? This is the definition of chronic homelessness. It's very confusing. I can explain it to you, but essentially what we did is we had to figure out how to make this, how to give this to our outreach workers and know that we were gonna get back something that would prove that someone met all of these conditions to be chronically homeless. So we gave them this verification form, and I'm gonna show you a lot of documents. They're in this kind of orange binder up here, so if you ever wanted to take a closer look at some of the documents that I'm gonna have up on the screen, please do. And essentially, we asked, what months did this person experience homelessness, when did it begin, and can you sign at the bottom, and can you attest that this is the case? As a caseworker, is the person self-attesting? So we did a lot of this, a lot of like problem solving on the spot of, okay, we need this. We need to know that people are chronically homeless. Let's build something that actually works for our folks and that is clear with them about what the requirements are. We also matched people with points of contact, so those were outreach workers that we're maybe already working with. We have this by name list, so we had a list of folks from coordinated entry who are presumptively eligible for this process. So we brought together all those outreach workers and we said, okay, tell us who you're working with, but you cannot have more than 5 folks on this list that you're responsible for. Because you have that one outreach worker that works with like 20 folks, so we didn't want that. But the points of contact were really one of the key parts of this process working. They were able to kind of work directly with folks that they've been working for a long time and kind of instill hope that, hey, you're gonna be a part of this process where we are committed to getting you to the finish line, to getting you housing. It is going to happen this time. So we assigned those points of contact, and then we expedited and streamlined the housing process. So there's a lot of documents, like I said, they're in this binder up here. We had a document interview to understand what documents people had and what documents people didn't. We knew we were working with a chronically homeless population that might lack a lot of those documents. We needed to know what documents the landlord actually needed, which ones they wish they had. We needed a release of information to be able to talk about folks in that larger group. We had a questionnaire about like what furniture people would need on moving in, who would make you feel unsafe if they were in the building, and what are some of the support services that you're interested in receiving with your housing, so that we could get all of that information on the front end. We worked with Tompkins County Mental Health to have an easy access referral process for mental health services if people needed either a diagnosis or just wanted to see a therapist. I worked with the Social Security Administration. They were so confused. I called them and I was like, I got 40 people. I don't want to send them all to you. And they're like, okay. So we worked on like access instructions for a Social Security card. At some point, I was able to advocate for someone who had received too many or whatever. And so I spoke with them and I was like, this person's part of the surge. And they're like, okay, we get it. And slowly across the community, this language around a surge really got people like motivated to move folks into housing and to get involved and to be a part of the solution to that. We talked to the DMV about doing an ID search. It didn't really pan out because the DMV was like very strict about their rules and regulations, so that is something that we passed on to the support services staff to work with people on, and we printed HMIS IDs for a lot of our participants to be able to move into that housing at least for the first 6 months until they got like a more formal ID. I had a document upload. People could send things to me in an encrypted way. We did a weekly binding list review and process updates, and we gave people a first priority lease signing where I had the landlord come to the sites where people were staying. So the emergency shelter, they signed leases. They went to a medical provider and signed leases. They even offered to go into the encampments, and I was like, that's a little bit too much. Like, folks can come inside and like get some water and like get some snacks, you know? And so we had a week of just lease signings, mass lease signings, where people were crying, like it was very emotional. This one person came in with their mom who was like, look, you're gonna have plates, you know? Like, they're so excited about this. And so these are some of those documents. Again, I have them at the front if you're interested in like, what does a document interview mean? What did your release look like? If you're a nerd like me, and we also got this letter from the property manager that says, Simone Gatson is allowed to speak to DSS on our behalf for all things search related. And we sent this with every participant who had to, you know, navigate the emergency shelter process. A lot of our folks were outside. But for those that were in the emergency shelter, DSS contacted me, who knows the ins and outs of the system, about the things that folks needed in order to maintain their emergency shelter stay. And then finally, we tried for outcomes and had some continuous quality improvement. So we worked across ultimately 17 providers. We had weekly meetings, and there were 40 people experiencing chronic homelessness that were on that by name list at a given time. So we also had this like survey, so we asked people those points of contact, like, how well am I doing? Am I communicating things clearly? Are these documents working for you? So that was also helpful. This is kind of the process as a whole. It's a lot. So but we wanted to make a little flow chart to integrate into materials to show other people how we did this. And then finally, we're going to go through kind of the outcomes of this whole process. So we started with a list of 60 households. 40 of those households were able to continue with the surge. Of those 20 households that did not continue, 5 were unable to be reached, 5 chose other housing options, 9 were found to be ineligible for the opportunity based on one of those criteria that I mentioned earlier, and 1 chose not to participate. We had frequent meetings with all these providers, and as a result, we saw that some people just had positive housing outcomes from those frequent meetings across our system. So 6 people were just able to find alternate housing just as a result of that like weekly check-in and case management, and oh, where is this person? Can we move them in on Saturday? That kind of thing. And as a result, we added alternates to our list whenever folks would come off of that main list, which was also really exciting because folks thought they weren't a part of the surge, and we called them and said, hey, you know that thing everyone's been talking about? You're in it. There were also negative outcomes over time. So 2 surge participants were denied by property management, 2 alternates were found to ultimately be ineligible, and 1 head of household did pass away over the course of time between when we started this binding list and when we were able to move folks in, because it was a brand new building, so some construction had to take place. We filled those spots with additional alternates, and 40 households were approved for move-in by the end of May. Unfortunately, one of those households passed away in jail like 2 days before move-in, which was really a blow for the whole process. But yes, so I've kind of summed together all of the folks here that had different outcomes. So by move-in day, 39 households moved into permanent supported housing and steering. Of the other 32 households who engaged in the process, so just kind of summing up all the things I just told you, 11 households were able to find other housing through this process, 5 households could not be found, 13 households were ineligible, 1 household declined, and 2 heads of household died. Well, what we said to people as a part of this process was, even if we find out you're not ultimately eligible in this process, we're still gonna like connect with you, we're still gonna try to get you across that finish line to another housing opportunity or system. So we followed up with these participants that moved into the housing and their outcomes and making sure they're getting everything that they need, but we're also following up with the 21 households who were not able to enter that housing. 6 of these households were eventually able to move into housing, 3 households still could not be found. 4 households eventually moved out of state to some other opportunity. 5 households were institutionalized, and 2 households we're still working with who are experiencing homelessness. 57 households total experiencing chronic homelessness were housed in the span of 4 months. It was really interesting as a part of this process to also track because we would ask people every week, where is your person sleeping? And we could see that when cold weather policy ended, we had some folks were able to get THA. We had about a 50% denial rate for THA in the system, by the way. And the other half of folks ended up being outside, ended up being in couch surfing situations where they might have been able to go back to a family member and say, hey, I have this housing opportunity, can I stay with you for a month until that opens up? So that was really interesting to kind of track where people ended up across our system. And then we did it. Move-in day was very special, very chaotic. We moved in 36 households that very first day. So people were showing up, they had their lease signed, they had U-Hauls coming and going. You know, we had people, everyone was all sweaty and exhausted by the end of the day. It was a lot. We had that landlord and another property manager come in and basically do walkthroughs, make sure people had everything they needed and got into that room, and then we're following up with their support services staff that whole day. It was a lot. By the end of the day, my partner was like, I think you need a burrito. You're looking pale, you're not looking good. It was awesome. Any questions? There's a schnitzel. The schnitzel is a fun guy. He loves eating cheese. He ate half of the cheese Danish the other day. It was awful, but he's very cute.
Was this picture after the cheesy?
Probably does. Any questions? Yeah.
Just a question about the folks who are ineligible. Do you have a sense of what the eligibility criteria they didn't meet? Where they're recurring themes?
Yeah, so sex offender status was a big part of that, which doesn't make sense to me. Because don't you want sex offenders to be inside instead of outside?
The federal grant, or was it
the federal, because the housing itself had a low income tax credit, so they weren't able to serve that population or folks who had that ban. So it was really those categories, or let me think if there was anything else. And then there were also some property management denials based on activities that had happened to other properties that they managed when that person was a guest, not actually the resident. So, and we did advocate for a few folks. There were a couple of folks that property management was no, and we were please, pretty please, that ended up getting into the housing. But, yeah.
You mentioned that those clients that didn't have ID were able to use the Shemaya system. What's that?
Yeah, so through the homeless management information system, you can actually print out an ID for folks who engage in that system if you have a picture of them, and it'll have their date of birth and their name on it. And a lot of times oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the name, but the HCV programs are willing to accept that for the first 6 months that someone moves in, and then they have to have an ID. So we were able to use that as kind of a loophole with property management to accept them on the front end, and then have some intensive engagement around getting that ID for the first 6 months. So, any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned the Section 8 was froze.
Oh yeah.
Can you explain that?
Well, our local HCV providers are under the understanding that we've run out of money for Section 8, so that's why there's a freeze on that currently. We've been talking with our United States Interagency Council on Homelessness representative about that freeze, and she doesn't believe that it's the case, but also they're very we talked to her around a time that Joe Biden dropped out and Kamala was in the new, and she's we're really busy, I'm so sorry. So she's working on it, but I do think that by next year it should be unfrozen, but right now it is really hard on our system that we aren't able to give people that kind of long-term housing subsidy because our list is frozen.
So I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
I'm heading to the housing. You say a visual assessment for traffic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Visual assessment.
Yeah.
That's, I know,
At the Department of Social Services.
really, visual assessment. Okay, my second question
Yes.
is, what about mobile IDs? There are states that communicate on the mobile ID, and I know that some people have phones, so they don't have the actual physical ID.
at least aren't aware of it.
It's very new.
Yeah, and a lot of our folks also like didn't have phones or had a hard time like accessing phones, or you would give them a phone and then a month later they need a new phone. So, but it's a great idea. Like I know there are a lot of ways that people have been able to solve the ID problem, but we just weren't able to give it to our community's resources at the time. So I think that's something we're definitely going to invest in for the next year. Yeah.
I might have missed it. Are these all like single people or couples? Are there any children or families?
Yeah, so they are, and I also might have some of this data coming up in a second, mostly single individuals, and then we had, I think, 6 households of 2, which might have been like a couple or a person with a child.
Okay, so there's a mixed population.
Yes.
And are they all still in the apartments right now?
Yeah. They are all studio and 1-bedroom units, so we moved them in June, but that's why the rule about like no more than 2 heartbeats was because they're all studio and 1-bedroom. All right. Community reception. How are things going now? So this is a kind of overhead view of the Ithaca Commons. If you are not familiar with it, essentially this whole like paved section in the middle is just like pedestrians. Some people are supposed to like walk their bikes, not ride their bikes. But it's essentially just like a nice little area where there's like small businesses, and it's very cute. It's kind of like the central feature of Ithaca. So our new building is right here, right next to City Hall, down this alleyway, across from the movie theater. And folks had a big issue with that, especially when, you know, we had kind of this, a lot of, like, people were excited about people moving from homelessness into housing. It substantially cut down our unsheltered population, and folks are less visible, like in our system. However, now they're being blamed for all of this crime that ever happens in that area. And there's been a recent article about how crime is down citywide, but it's up on the Commons, and people are very quick to immediately go, it's those 40 people that they moved in to housing. And I'll go through these next slides, because like, I don't want to give these people more airtime than I need to, but like, there's a lot of social media activity about like, why are you giving people apartments to get high in? There was a parvo breakout in the apartment that folks were working to kind of counteract. People were like, why do they even have dogs? They should have their dogs taken away from them. You're importing people from other countries to come live in Ithaca. False numbers about how much money we get to end homelessness. There shouldn't be any excuses. So a lot of folks, kind of like social media warriors, but we're a small community, so everyone sees this and feels like it's true. People don't know, for some reason, that the rest of the units are affordable housing, so they think that everyone else in the building is paying like $3,000 for their units. So they're big mad about that too.
The awful thing there is there's nothing to do from a PR point to even say you're wrong.
Right.
Here's what's really going on. Because they're not going to believe you anyways.
Right. Exactly. And this is one of the killers here, is that there's scanner pages in our community where people are posting scanner calls all day, 5 to 15 posts a day about what emergency services is being called to do in our community. And we have 18,000 people in our small community. So that is 1 out of 2 City of Ithaca residents, or 1 out of 5 Tompkins County residents, if you're looking at that bigger scale, who are getting 5 to 15 posts per day about all of the emergencies that are happening. And so it's fueling this rhetoric that like, this building is a problem, why is the fire department there, why are people overdosing, this and that. It is incredible, the amount of like community resistance that we've had to this project, and a lot of it is guided by social media. I think someone asked for my LinkedIn at some point, and I was like, I don't have social media because I can't. I will.
Yeah.
Worried about our folks and about vigilantism. We have folks with drones who are monitoring people in the encampments, and people are getting paranoid about this constant monitoring. It is, yeah.
Very, very violated.
Yes. And this has all led to this lovely quote that I put here because our downtown Ithaca Alliance and the executive director is not here in this room. But essentially this rhetoric that people don't feel safe here, you're impacting our businesses, you're impacting the vibrancy of our downtown economy. I tell people to stop smoking and they curse at me, and so I think someone's gonna hurt me someday. Like this fear, and that people not being able to discern the difference between discomfort and safety is really key here. And that there are folks, they don't know who's in the building. They don't know who we moved in with a surge versus someone just hanging out in this public third space, one of the last third spaces that we have. But they are blaming basically anyone who looks like they might be homeless is now immediately, oh, you put them in this building and it's your fault that we're dealing with this. So, back to the good. We did move 57 households experiencing chronic homelessness into housing in the span of 4 months. In terms of like, I have different demographics. We have a really strong kind of focus on racial equity in our plan, where every part of the plan comes with kind of a racial equity metric for have we served this population equitably, because we have those gross disparities in representation of BIPOC in our system. So we did meet our outcome for racial equity for folks who were coming from an unsheltered location. So this is kind of the demographics there. This is gender demographics. I'm just gonna go through some of these. We had a wide age range, so we had some folks who were, this was their first apartment and they are 20 years old, and we also had someone who was like over 65, so everyone in between, in terms of age range. This was the household size. We had 6 households that were like 2 people and 34 individuals who moved into the housing. All the clients had a disability. That's a part of the definition of chronic homelessness. We have like one veteran on our coordinated entry list at a given time, and then we let the VA know, and they're like, I'm on it, and then that person gets housed within a week. So we don't really have any chronically homeless veterans. Again, this flow chart will tell you about that disability status. This is in terms of like survivors of domestic violence. 68% of the folks who moved in were survivors. 7 of those folks were currently fleeing. A lot of our folks had some kind of income or non-cash benefits. There's also this rhetoric about, people who are living outside, they don't like work in our community, whatever. But a lot of folks were working. They had employment income or other sources of income as well. And then, where was your last permanent address? Just to counter that one narrative about us importing people to be in this project like we do. We asked people, what was your last permanent address? What was the zip code of your last permanent address? And what we found was that, there we go. Basically, about 75% of our folks, their last permanent address was in the city of Ithaca or Tompkins County. Some of them were in other parts of New York State, like Portland County, Tennessee County, Broome County. Some folks came from Florida, but all of them came here because they had familial ties to the area or friends who were here, and that was 25% of our folks. So they were experiencing homelessness in Tompkins County, and so we consider them ours. But just to kind of combat that narrative, I always love the numbers, love the data, to break down like, why are folks here? And then, where did you sleep last night? When we asked people, in case you can't see over there in the back, this is kind of outside, emergency shelter, couch surfing situation, and then some other situations like a car, jail, or the emergency room. A lot of our folks were sleeping outside, and we're able to move in from outside directly into this housing over the course of a few months. This is like the kinds of services that people were interested in. I love pulling up this slide too, because there's also a rhetoric around like, oh, people don't want services. But everyone we asked wanted services. The most common was transportation assistance people wanted, health services, financial stability support, mental health treatment, pet support. Folks wanted those services. And we were able to provide this information directly to the support services staff, so they could say, okay, like I know what this person is interested in, and this is what I'm gonna help to connect them with. Right after that. All right, this is Charles. He's a little old man, he's 17. He's a little chihuahua. He's very whiny, but I love him. Any questions about that? All right, so I said enough about the numbers and all the things, but I did want you to hear directly from a couple of residents who are currently in the housing, and they had kind of a chat with one of their support workers through Reach Medical. on the day of lease up, when that, landlord came to that medical provider and signed leases in their offices.
Well, what's going on? I'm on my lease today for an apartment, and I'm super excited.
Gina, before you got leased up today, were you homeless?
Been homeless for 7 months this time around.
So you've been in and out of homelessness. Has it been for many years?
Just really the last, not steady, but
Yeah.
this time around 7 months, but the longest. And through the winter, that was hard, that was really hard. Took a big savings thing because my family helps me a lot. They just don't always agree with my lifestyle and choices I made.
And you've got the health stuff going on too, which makes,
I've made the choices they don't make. I had some services, some people choose not to do treatment. I just want to get out, so I try not to get out. I really don't want to do this.
what are you looking forward to the most when you're in your own place?
Where people, I can just escape, that's when I'm because in this area there is so much love. And I just, I'm not willing to give any more time.
If there's one thing that you could tell people that are in your situation, what would it be?
Don't give up. Just don't give up. Even when you feel like there's nothing left, you still have some left. You just gotta dig deep. It's there. God gives you that power. Just do not give up.
Yeah.
Push it.
Was there anybody in particular at Reach that helped you work through the lease process?
I want to thank Lucy a lot. She, I give her a hard time. Because she's so, she's really easy, I give her a hard time, but she'll open up a little.
Yeah.
But she's been a big help, and Shauna, I give Shauna my heart. She's been there for everything, after hours, whenever I need her, she's been there.
That's so beautiful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You leased up.
Gina actually opened up a food pantry, like the second that she moved in. She was like, I'm gonna start provide food to the community. And we worked with her around like, what if you operated it not outside of your own apartment, but like the office, So she's awesome. She's already there building community with folks. And then the next person I wanted to introduce you to is Randall, who was our assistant, who was over the age of 60.
And Randall, you have had a pretty exciting day today.
Yes, ma'am.
What happened at Reach for you today?
Today I got my new apartment.
You signed a lease,
I signed it.
an apartment that's all your own.
Yes.
Before you signed this lease today, have you been homeless, Randall?
For 3 years.
You've been homeless for
3 years, but, I found a place. And I think I live out.
yeah,
And I got this new place. So,
and it's all yours.
all right.
And is there anybody at Reach in particular that helped you move through this process?
Everybody.
And this is a place, when you walk into Reach, what do you feel like you're walking into?
Man, it's kind of hard to explain it, but it's just, the energy here is awesome. Because when the person is at my point, if you knock on the shelter's door, that means that you're actually alive. So, and everybody here at Reach is just really reached out to me and made me feel good about myself and my situation. And I'm just excited, because, God is good. Because I don't, signs, signing.
Yeah.
I just want to put this in there, because, you know, there's a lot of wonderful people out there, especially women. A lot of people along the way. We find my son, and a lot of people stop and talk to him, and different things, everybody water to him, you know, and their energy, you know, is just great, you know, and I wanna say that, I gotta get this in here, because that corner that I was by my son on is, me and the other guy, we prayed on that corner, and that corner is the best corner. It's the best corner, it's really best, I never met, I met people from all walks of life, you know, so I just wanna say that I'm so excited and happy and thankful to everybody, everyone is my heart calling, you know.
You're such a special released up. You got your own place.
Wow. I wanna help people, as I've been doing, trying to do, even in my bad situation. It's just to help people, you know, to get to where we need to be. My biggest goal is to hopefully one day, you know, to open up a support house, you know, to help people. That's probably a long way, man. I mean, really a long way.
Can I say something now? You did that work. We helped you, but this work is yours to be proud of. This is yours to bear on to. It was our honor.
Right. Yeah. You know, and a lot of times, you know, being homeless, it takes a lot to fly that sun. You know, you get all kinds of comments, you know, and I would say myself, you know, why can't people just read it, they don't do it, and just keep it moving, but, you know, they got some people are negative, but you just gotta stay positive. And I wanna say the reason we help is just stay like people in this world. You know, thank you, God.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Released up.
Yeah.
You released up?
Yeah, he's that, yeah.
So that's it. I just wanted to close off with some of that positivity, because I know that while the community, you know, reception piece of things has been difficult, I think that seeing all of those people come in on that first day and move into their new apartments, including Randall, oh my God, his outreach worker was crying. She was like trying to turn away so he couldn't see how much she was crying. It was really beautiful, and these are all, you know, that we can break it down into numbers, we can break it down into outcomes, but they are all folks who have stories to tell and goals and things that they want to like bring back to their community and out of their house. Any questions, folks? Yeah.
Two questions. How many dogs do you have?
So 4. So Simba and then Schnitzel, so this is the 2 of them. And then Charles and Zazu. These are pretty girls, so yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Second question is, I know this was a focus on individuals or small households. The rural communities that some of my housing counselors work with are in Wayne, Ontario, Livingston, so kind of adjacent to Conference, but I've seen a lot of issues with either single parents or families that just have large families, and those are especially hard to find anything affordable or just has enough size. So I didn't know if that was common and what maybe Tompkins County or any suggestions or things that you can.
Yeah, so the family conversation is a good one to have. In our community, we are finding that families have better outcomes, 0% returns to homelessness, and are experiencing homelessness for shorter lengths of time than our single individuals. So especially for this surge specifically, because one of the criteria was chronic homelessness, we don't see a lot of folks who are experiencing chronic homelessness. So been homeless for a year or more, either concurrently or at least 4 times over the past 3 years, that equals a year is the definition with a disability. So we don't see folks who come from those situations who tend to have those larger families because those family members are taken away from them, right? And so I always like to acknowledge that while we have, you know, quote unquote individuals who moved into our surge, a lot of those folks have reunification plans with a child. And because they have not been able to enter housing, they have not been able to move forward with that reunification plan. And we see that a lot in our community where it's almost like, you know, people are very concerned about families, and I understand that, and we are working to expand like family units. We have a really big problem, especially with like pregnant people who are in the system losing their babies as soon as they give birth. And again, that would have been a family, but is not. So we're trying to work to kind of almost do some more like prevention resources for families, and also to support folks in having families when they are in the system. So that work is happening, but for this one we wanted to really focus on this population, especially focusing on our unsheltered population, which has been the most visible and the target of a lot of the like vitriol in the community. But it's a great point, and I don't mean to like disregard families.
No, it's kind of like the opposite end where it's
Right.
like, you know, I have a client with like 7 kids, and it's just tough to find them.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions?
I have just 2 quick questions. So one on like the scanners and the EMS calls, right? Do you have a sense of what those are? Because I think when folks like dig into an interrogation, a lot of it is like full course, right? Like nothing serious. And so what I'm getting at is leads to my second question is just like people have a lot of great data. These folks are out of community.
Yeah.
And like this willful disinformation by these, you know, keyboard, you know, warriors, right? I do believe protection fees at all costs. But I just like, I'm honest, it's like, you know, speak the truth and shake the devil. Like, this is the real data. These are your neighbors. These are not, you know, like, and so I don't know how worthwhile it is, but I'm just, anyway.
So a lot of those calls they're like calls. It's the way the call comes in. It's not necessarily what the outcome is. So I do think a lot of them are like, it's hard to even call them the truth or to say like, these are the kind of things that are happening, because a lot of them aren't even actually what is happening, you know? So you can call that, you know, there's a woman downstairs and she looks like she's on crack, and then everyone is in the comments, because they leave the comments open, of course, being like, this building is open and they have people on crack in their lobby. And then they show up and it's like a woman who like hasn't slept for a day because she's trying to, you know, go into the emergency shelter and she doesn't have anywhere to sleep, and she's not on crack, you know? So it's that kind of thing of like the way the calls come in, but then people don't have the like critical thinking skills to be like, wait, this isn't necessarily true. It's just, this is not meant for me. First of all, it's meant for the emergency services providers. But so I think, sorry, circling back to your point about, you know, getting into the community and like spreading the word. So we had a summit last year, I believe it was last year, yes, in November, to basically bring in all of this. So we had like the police chief, the fire chief, we had all of our supportive services staff, we had the grassroots organizations and the not-for-profits and business owners come in, and we brought in local experts and regional experts. So both in our like area, but also our USICH representative and different folks like state folks, and we brought them all together, and we basically made them listen to panels of people advocating for housing first in various communities for the whole day. And by the end of it, they were like, we get it. We're like, we get it, okay. It's not housing only, it's housing with supports, and this is how it's supposed to work, and this is why it works, and here's the evidence. So we did some of that for what we called like 100 system leaders. We basically brought them together and said, listen to all these experts, because you won't listen to us. But for the larger public, we are kind of working potentially with our local United Way to kind of get that message out. But I think at this point, you know, I'm a professional, I'm an expert, I do a lot of reading, but unfortunately to this community, I'm an advocate. I'm a, you know, bleeding heart, someone whose opinion is just as worthy as theirs, which, you know, you can keep your own opinions or whatever. So we are trying to engage another organization to kind of pull at the front of that kind of media and really kind of flooding everyone with the actual information that is true. But it is so hard with like Facebook and other social media sites, because they'll just make another private group where that person that keeps saying that they're lying isn't in the comments, or they'll block you. So yeah, it is something that we're still trying to like strategize about how to move forward with, but like Libby's been blocked from a couple of those groups. Yeah. But yeah, you're totally right. I think there is room for a lot of like narrative telling and a lot of sharing of some of the data as well. Any other questions? Well, thank you. Thanks. You can email me. Yeah, and if you have questions later, like you want, there's some materials up here if you wanted to look closer at those, but if you want to talk to me about how to do this in your community, feel free to email me.